Upload. All right, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining the first webinar on the World Bank and the COVID series. My name is Stephanie Broeder. I am the liaison to the World Bank at the Netherlands Embassy. So I'll be your host. So a quick few words to introduce this session. First speaker will be Commerijn Plomp. She will briefly describe what RVO is doing and how RVO can help the businesses. Second speaker will be the executive director of the World Bank, Koen Davidse. Koen will discuss the outline of what the World Bank is doing with COVID and how it's handling this whole crisis. Third speaker will be Jan de Boer. He is the advisor to the executive director, the advisor to Koen Davidse of the Dutch Constituency Office. So welcome everybody, and I will give the first a few quick words to Commerijn Plomp.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thanks for the kind introduction and thanks for organizing this together with us. I think this is, I won't take too much of your time, first of all, because I think most of the companies joining are aware of what RVO, TO team and the embassy can do for you. But I think over the past few months, we've faced tremendous changes in the world, and it has also enormous impact on what the World Bank is doing. Of course, we're sitting here in our homes and we're having different working lives than we had before. And actually, we thought it would be a good opportunity to have today to reconnect and to see what are the changes to the World Bank's way of working. What is their initial response to COVID, but also how does COVID impact the other programs that the World Bank has committed to. So if after today you remain with questions and you think, okay, but who is doing what, or how can I connect to whatever, please do let us know. Connect to TO, connect to the embassy, and we'll be glad to help you. I'll pass over back to Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you so much, Commerijn. Well, I just want to mention one thing. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box and not in the chat or the raise your hand function. So we hold off on questions until the end of all the presentations. So please use the Q&A so we can combine all questions and wait till the end. So next up is Koen Davidse, so Executive Director to the Netherlands Constituency Office at the World Bank. Koen, all yours.
Thank you very much, Stephanie and Commerijn. And everybody else on the call, very happy to be with you today. I hope you and your family are safe and sound because we're talking about COVID, and it's not just something that affects the world and the World Bank, but it affects us all. So please stay safe. COVID has had a devastating impact. There's been the loss of life, health sectors under stress, simultaneous everywhere there's been a recession, and the economic impact has been severe. Trade is down. Global growth is negative. I think those are the headlines that unfortunately we all got to know. And let me, in the first slide maybe, Jan is, I'm looking, we're trying to show you a presentation, but let me continue anyway, and we'll see if the slides join us. So the impact has been severe on the core mission of the bank, which is to eradicate poverty by 2030. And there you see that global poverty rates have again gone over 700 million. And that basically means that the World Bank projects that COVID adds 88 to 140 million people to the poor. And that is quite a substantial setback, while we were expecting poverty to basically dip below 600 million and get closer to 500 million. So what are the characteristics of poverty that we now see? Well, poverty traditionally was very much a rural phenomenon, but now we see that the new poor are likely to be urban informal sector workers, and those are mostly young people and women. So we see that those are suffering very much from what is happening basically with the COVID. And COVID leads to additional financing needs because countries lose out. Countries lose out in terms of revenue, fiscal revenue, they lose out in terms of trade, they lose out in terms of selling commodities. So they need extra resources. And some estimates are that for the poorest countries, the poorest 78 countries, the so-called IDA countries, that would be 100 billion a year. For IBRD countries, middle income countries, that would be up to 600 billion. But of course, we expect those middle income countries to be able to go back to the capital markets, while the poorest countries will not be able to do that. Here you see the slide where you see in blue what the projection was of poverty going down. And now you see that basically in the severe scenario, poverty goes up to 2015 levels and beyond, while in a slightly less severe scenario, it still goes up to about 2016, 2017 levels. So that's a substantial loss of opportunity for many poor people in the world. So let's go to our next slide. So here we see the change in terms of financing. And there you see basically that the World Bank is acting counter-cyclical. It is basically front-loading resources, taking resources from future years to use to basically help countries now. And that provides substantial impulse, especially for the poorest countries where the World Bank is still a substantial donor. The bank responded with an announcement of $160 billion financing for a period of 15 months. That is more than its usual resources, but it builds on its usual resources. And it has significantly ramped up financing in fiscal year 20, which ended on July 1st. And over 100 countries have been assisted with COVID health projects, providing immediate financing for health procurement and also providing some support for social protection. So basically helping with programs that help the poor. Let's go to our next slide and show, how has the bank basically responded? Well, here's an overview of the pillars and phases that the bank sees. If you look horizontally, you'll see that there's the relief phase, which is to some extent still there, but main operations have been undertaken. And that concerns what I just talked about, supporting the health sector, immediate health needs, and also some social protection programs. Then restructuring, which basically means restructuring in terms of helping countries reform to deal with the situation, but also restructuring current programs of the bank, because the bank is looking at how can we reallocate resources of less priority projects so that they help with the COVID recovery. And then the last phase, resilient recovery, basically going back to our goals. We had the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris goals. Countries have nationally determined contributions under Paris. Can we still achieve those goals, and how can we get back to them? We haven't lost sight of those. And this is basically about an inclusive and sustainable recovery. And you see there vertically, you see save lives. That was, of course, the priority in terms of making sure that as few people as possible get infected, and that those who get infected survive. Protecting the poorest and the most vulnerable. I already talked about the informal sector, women and youth. Ensure sustainable business growth and job creation. IFC, the private sector arm of the bank, has been in touch with a lot of clients and other contacts to see whether they could shore up companies, viable companies, so that jobs could be saved. And last but not least, strengthening policies, institutions, and investments for rebuilding better. And that basically means that now is the time to really weigh, because countries also suffer severe, many poorest countries suffer a severe debt crisis, to weigh what kind of investment you're going to do with the money you get. The bank has been taking an initiative called, with the IMF, the Debt Service Suspension Initiative, trying to get countries relief in terms of debt. And that money, the relief they get, needs to be spent well in order to make a difference with the recovery. Now, the last slide that I will, the last slide that I will address is that you basically see here once again illustrated how much more the bank has been spending in the past months. So the bank has really, the bank is working from home in not just in Washington, but in most countries. But the bank is working extremely hard in order to basically assist countries. We are in video calls all the time. Fortunately, we now have the nearly 50% of the staff decentralized, so they're working hard in country in order to make a difference, and we're constantly in touch with them. And here you see how by themes the spending has been in terms of saving lives, social protection, going back to job growth and institutional support. So you can see the division of the expenditures. And now I hand over to our advisor, Jan de Boer.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon. I will talk a little bit about the impact of COVID on World Bank procurement. And I will also talk a little bit about trends that were already there before COVID. So this is another slide on the financing as a result of COVID, so the bank's response. And well, you already saw that in financial year 20, so last year, the bank ramped up its lending volume, and it's expected that this year, so financial year 21, even more lending will go out. So this shows the opportunities for the private sector. We expect this will be linked to a significant number of investment projects, which creates opportunities. In financial year 20, so that's a total volume of 61 billion, more than half of the funding went to investment projects, which is a higher share than normal, and it shows the significant opportunities there. But as you can see as well, and Koen referred to that, the years beyond financial year 21, the volume might be lower, and that's a result of the front loading. So the window of opportunity is also fairly short. That's the key message here. Well, I'll continue. Let me just make clear that in this presentation, I will focus on the public arm of the World Bank Group, so the IBRD and IDA. I will not focus on IFC, MIGA, so the private sector arm, although IFC, MIGA support the private sector by providing loans. I think most procurement opportunities arise from the bank, and also most lending goes through the public arm, between 2/3 and even 75% last year. So talking about general trends already before COVID, an important development I think many of you are aware of is the new procurement framework that was adopted in 2016. And one of the key elements is the focus on value for money, which is generally good news for Dutch firms. The procurement framework also allows for more innovative solutions, and there are several pilots already being implemented. One example is performance-based contracting. I think Commerijn talked about this in the past. Some of you might be aware. So this is in particularly interesting for the water sector, for infrastructure. The Dutch government has contributed to a trust fund, and pilots are being identified at the moment. So this is an interesting area which might be interesting for Dutch firms. Another interesting new solution is direct selection of firms, and this is an area where Dutch companies are actually they are benefiting from this tool, so to speak. So the share is relatively high for Dutch firms, and I will come back to that later. Other possibilities under this procurement framework is hands-on implementation support by the bank and working with third parties like the UN, and especially in fragile and conflict-affected countries. Very briefly, here you can see the sectors where most contract awards are provided. So the most tenders, the large tenders are in these sectors, and as you can see, the bank is mainly active in transport and energy, and this explains also why certain supplier countries are doing well, and others, perhaps like the Netherlands, are performing, are ranking a little lower, because the Dutch firms in general are more focused on agriculture, water, and health. Here you can see the regional distribution, and well, it's clear the bank is truly a World Bank, active in all regions, perhaps as a result of the COVID crisis, but also moving to 2030, there will be more focus on Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, but it's a fairly equal distribution. Very briefly, where does the Netherlands and Dutch suppliers rank? Well, here you see the Netherlands is at a position of, it's a 25th supplier country. Perhaps referring to, let me refer to China, India, they are the largest suppliers. It's not a surprise, also given that there are so many contracts in the infrastructure sector. But the Netherlands actually does better than expected. It might appear that we are pretty low, but it's if you correct for the fact that lots of countries have an advantage doing business in their own country, Indian companies, for example, if you would correct for that effect, the Netherlands would already be on a place of on a 15th place. Also, Dutch firms are more active in consultancy contracts as opposed to goods and services. So if I would only zoom in on consultancy contracts, and you can see that here, Dutch firms are the 5th largest supplier country. And last year, the Netherlands was even the 1st country in terms of consultancy contracts. You can also see that on this slide. Last year, 2020, so fiscal year 20, it was an exceptionally good year, also because one consultancy firm won a major contract. And here, the point I want to make here, and I think many of you are aware of that, is that it's important, if you want to win a contract, to be very early in the project cycle. Be aware of the opportunities, and that means going local. Perhaps Stephanie Commerijn will talk about that as well. Talk to the country officers of the World Bank, especially since a new decentralization strategy has been adopted. More power will go to the region. So talk to the local offices of the World Bank Group, and of course also to the Dutch Embassy and RVO. That can help you in identifying opportunities. Think of Lebanon, where in Beirut now a lot of construction works are going to be identified. And I think there are also events organized by RVO in this regard. Now, I think this is really the Here I will share some specific observations on the impact of COVID on procurement. I already mentioned the impact of front loading. So more financing will be provided, especially in this year. And this could imply there will be also less financing available in the years beyond that. The procurement numbers so far, they don't show this increase yet. They are actually a little lower than previous years, but we expect this is just a delay in administration. Also, the last 6 months, we have seen a number of cancellations and restructuring of projects to channel funds to emergency projects, to health projects, and to some budget support. So that might explain why we see this, why we don't see this translated in more procurement contracts, but over time it's expected that there will be more opportunities. Another element I want to point out is the introduction of bank facilitated procurement. So the bank is helping countries bargaining contracts with suppliers, in particular medical equipment. So they negotiate on behalf of a number of developing countries, especially when there is a lot of competition. This happened, for example, in the market for ventilators, and the bank helped these governments procuring for these equipment. So far 30 countries are supported by this, representing contract value of 155 million. Another element is that some procedures have been temporarily changed, especially in the emergency phase. So as from April, the bank adopted a fast-track facility, which allowed for several projects in the health sector in particular, but also other projects. And here the bank allowed for retroactive financing of contracts. So there were no prior reviews for existing clients. There was also a waiver for the anti-corruption guidelines, which was only applied to the winning bid. No surprise, but in this period we observed more direct selection and the use of third parties like the UN, especially in the health sector. There are lots of projects where the bank works directly with the UN, and the UN does the procurement process. We also observe more local suppliers winning tenders. This could point to some red flags. There are obviously, there are of course stories out there where we see fraud and corruption. This is no secret. At the same time, the World Bank procurement rules are rigid, and there are checks and balances. And the use of more local suppliers could, for developing countries, could also be positive news, of course, if suppliers access their own market. Then maybe briefly two more points on because of the virus, more electronic bid submissions were needed. Obviously, this also created opportunities for countries to reform their procurement system, creating more transparency. We have seen that in countries like Moldova, but has not been possible for all countries. Some countries were simply lacking good internet connections. So there, this caused some issues. And the last point I wanted to close with is the needs are constantly evolving. So where in the beginning the World Bank was helping with procuring contracts for ventilators, for example, it turned out that at a later stage there was less need for ventilators, was more need for other equipment or medicine. So yeah, the rapidly evolving developments, which also explains why sometimes there seems to be a lot of demand and later this changes. So here you find a general overview of important links if you want to look for more information. And I really want to close this presentation also with a question to the participants today. I shared some information on the impact of COVID to procurement, at least how we observe it, but we are extremely interested in your views and experiences. So Stephanie, let me hand it over back to you.